What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. We continue with our 2023 predictions. Florida State is up next. The Noles have a lot of hype coming into this year. I am a believer in Florida State. I've had them consistently in my top 5 in my preseason rankings. I'll talk a little bit more about them in just a second. Let's look at some of the other predictions. The FBI, not as high on this team, 8.7 and 3.5. Remember, though, the FBI uses the last 3 years. They go by the last 3 years to try to figure out how good a team is going to be. And Florida State wasn't great before last year. You know, they've been on the rise. So that's probably why that number is as low as it is. But still, they have them maybe going 9 and 3. Athlon has them at 10 and 2. The over/under is at 9.5. So it does seem like the most likely records for Florida State this year are 9 and 3 or 10 and 2. Based off of these other predictions. Like I said, I'm really high on this team. Jordan Travis continues to grow as a quarterback. He has now become a star, and I love the addition of Keon Coleman to go with Johnny Wilson. They've got weapons to throw the ball to. You got one of the best running backs in the country in Trey Benson. I love what they did in the transfer portal, really across the board. Filled all of their needs. Did a great job in the transfer portal. The offensive line looks really solid for them. A defensive line looks really good as well, of course. It all starts with Jared Verse there. Linebacker's pretty solid. Secondary's pretty solid. And again, I think this team is on the way up. I think they're going to be improved this year. How much improved? Well, we'll see. They've got 2 really tough tests on the schedule. And of course, that's LSU and Clemson. But you look at the rest of the schedule, and Florida State should be favored in every other game. So you think, if you can split LSU Clemson, you can get to 11-1 and have a chance to get to the college football playoff. But we'll start with that LSU game. I've already done my LSU video. If you missed it, you can go back and watch it. And I talked a lot about this game, a game that I've really been having a hard time with. And again, I talked in that video about the strengths and weaknesses of both teams and how they're very similar. I mean, really similar teams. But at the end of the day, I think the revenge factor for LSU and the linebackers for LSU, specifically Harold Perkins, that's going to be the difference in this game. I'm going to go with LSU, but this could, I mean, again, I've been back and forth on this prediction really for months, and it's been probably the hardest game to predict. And from all the games this year, this is the hardest game for me to predict. But I'm going to go with LSU, and that's going to get Florida State off to an 0-1 start. They'll play Southern Miss after that. Should be a pretty easy win, so that gets them to 1-1. Then you've got a kind of a tricky spot here to play Boston College on the road. You've already got a loss here, and then you've got Clemson coming up on the road the next week. Maybe this is one of those trap game situations. I think Boston College is actually going to be a little bit better this year, but not a ton better. So Florida State's still going to be the better team. So it's one of those where maybe they struggle for a quarter or a half, get off to a slow start, but then they pick it up in the second half and pull away and wind up winning this game fairly easily. So I do think they beat Boston College. Then you've got Clemson on the 23rd. Last year Clemson looked like they were going to dominate early. Florida State came back and made that interesting late in the game. But just where this game is in Death Valley, I think it's going to be very tough for Florida State to go in there and win. That's one of the toughest places in all of college football. This is a very talented Clemson team. I don't think Florida State has an advantage talent-wise. Maybe experience-wise they have an advantage. So, I think it'll be a competitive game. I don't see this being a blowout. I think Florida State's going to go in there and fight. But at the end of the day, I think that home field advantage is going to be the difference. If this game was in Tallahassee, I would pick Florida State this year because I think the teams are very even. I actually think Florida State's probably a little bit better team, and again, because of the experience that they have. But again, I'm going to go with Clemson here at home. So that gets Florida State to 2-2. Not how you want to start if you're a top 5 team. They play Virginia Tech after that on October the 7th. Virginia Tech's another team that I think is going to be improved this year. How does Florida State handle the loss and already 2 losses? And maybe they start slow, kind of like the Boston College game. But playing at home, they'll take care of business and they'll pull away in the second half. After that, Syracuse on the 14th. Not all that high on the Syracuse team this year. I think Florida State will play really well here, take care of business at home, and win. They actually get 3 home games in a row: Virginia Tech, Syracuse, and Duke. Florida State lost those 3 games last year, and they still bounced back and finished strong. So I don't think the season's going to be over for them after the 2 losses. Still a chance to win out and maybe win the ACC championship. And maybe that's enough to get into the college football playoff, depending on how everything goes. So I think there's still going to be a lot of fight in this team. But this is a good Duke team that they'll play on the 21st. This is an experienced team. I've been talking about them for a while now. I think they're really flying under the radar, and I expect this to be a very good game, close game. But home field advantage, the difference. Florida State, they find a way to win, and they are the more talented team if you just look at the two rosters. So I do think they'll win, but I think it'll be a competitive game, and that's going to get them to 5-2. Wake Forest after that on the 28th. Probably a shootout here. Probably a lot of points in this game. Wake Forest, even without Sam Hartman, I expect them to still have a good offense. But their defense is going to be questionable. So Florida State might put up 50 in this game, and I do think they will win on the road. Pittsburgh is up next. Another spot for a potential upset alert, maybe a trap game here right before the rivalry against Miami on the road at Pitt. I'm not real high on Pitt, but I think they'll be a solid team this year. And just because of where this game is, because it's on the road, I do think Florida State's going to have a hard time in this one. I expect a 4-quarter game that comes down to the wire. I'm going to pick Florida State, though. I think they find a way to get it done. It's close. It's a scare, but they get the win over Pitt. Then they'll play Miami on the 11th. This Miami team is actually, I think, going to be pretty good this year. Talent-wise, roster-wise, they match up with Florida State very well. Experience-wise, again, Florida State does have an advantage. That's the thing with Florida State. They're not just talented this year. They've got a lot of guys with experience. Some of the transfers they brought in, have played 3 and 4 years. So they're going to be really experienced this year to go along with the talent they'll have on the roster. And they're going to be playing at home. It's a rivalry. I actually expect this game to be very close. Nothing like last year, but I think Florida State, with that experience, gets the win. And then I think they'll beat North Alabama as well on the 18th. So that gets them to 9-2. And then Florida is next on the road in the Swamp, November 25th. Going to be a really interesting matchup here. Florida is a team that I think a lot of people were talking about 4-8, 5-7, saying this team's not going to be very good. They could go 5-7, but they're not going to be a bad team. It's just their schedule is absolutely brutal. I've ranked it as the toughest schedule in college football. But yeah, I don't think Florida's going to be a terrible team. And they're going to fight. This is a rivalry game. They're going to be playing at home. So I don't expect an easy win for Florida State. Probably a game that's similar to last year. I do think Florida State wins it. But again, it won't be easy here in this rivalry. So I've got them finishing 10-2, which should be enough to get them to the ACC Championship. Who will they play? Maybe it'll be Clemson. Maybe North Carolina sneaks in there. We'll see how all that plays out with my other predictions. But yeah, 10-2 is the prediction for me. I really don't see this team losing any of these games in the green. I feel confident that they're going to win all of those games. If they can split with LSU and Clemson and find a way to win one of those games, I think there's a really good chance this team could go 11-1. And like I said, I was back and forth on that LSU game. 10-2 or 11-1 for Florida State. It was very hard to decide, but at the end of the day, I did go with 10-2 with those two tough games. And if they did split them, you could still see them potentially lose, to Pittsburgh on the road or maybe Miami or Florida, because those are rivalry games. So 10-2, I think, is a good record. I think that's where they're going to finish. That's my official prediction. Give me your official prediction for Florida State down in the comments below.